Many men quietly ask this question, often late at night, when no one is watching, and no one is asking them to be strong. Why am I still single? Not because they are desperate for attention, but because they are tired of waiting without understanding. They look around and see others moving forward, relationships forming, marriages beginning, while they feel like life has placed them on pause. And over time, that waiting starts to feel personal, almost like rejection, almost like God has forgotten their name. But Scripture shows us something very different. God has never treated singleness as a mistake or a delay. He treats it as a season of construction. Throughout the Bible, whenever God planned to entrust a man with influence, leadership, or covenant responsibility, He first led him into a hidden season where nothing looked impressive on the outside, but everything was being shaped on the inside. What feels like loneliness is often isolation by design. What feels like silence is often God working without interruption. This is important to understand because the world tells men that their worth is measured by who chooses them, who desires them, or who stands beside them. God tells a different story. God builds a man before He connects him. He strengthens roots before allowing branches to grow. And many times, the reason a man remains single longer than expected is not because something is missing in his life, but because something is still being formed within him. Today, we're going to talk about what God is actually building in men while they are single. Not surface-level lessons, not cliches, but deep spiritual foundations that protect future relationships and shape a man into someone who can love without losing himself, lead without controlling, and commit without fear. If you're in a season of singleness and you've been wondering whether it has any meaning at all, this message may change the way you see this chapter of your life. Reason 1. God builds identity before relationship. Before God ever brought Eve to Adam, He gave Adam something far more important: identity and calling. Genesis tells us that Adam was created, placed in the garden, given responsibility, and entrusted with purpose before relationship entered the picture. Adam knew who he was and what he was called to steward long before he knew what companionship felt like. That order matters. In God's design, identity always comes before intimacy, and sonship always comes before partnership. This is why God often keeps men single longer than they expect. Not as punishment, but as protection. When a man does not know who he is in God, he will unconsciously ask a woman to confirm his worth. He will enter relationships not to give love, but to receive validation. And love built on lack will always collapse under pressure. God understands this, which is why He refuses to let identity be formed inside romance. Identity must be rooted in Him first. Many men don't realize that what they call loneliness is often a deeper wound, the belief that they are only valuable if someone chooses them. But Scripture is clear. Your value was established the moment God called you His son, not the moment someone said, "I love you." When identity is unclear, love becomes dangerous. You cling too tightly, tolerate what you shouldn't, or shapeshift to avoid being abandoned. God delays relationship not because you're unworthy of love, but because He wants you free enough to love without fear. Singleness, then, becomes a healing ground, a season where God gently removes the lie that says, "I need to be loved to be whole." Instead, He teaches a man to stand secure in sonship, to know who he is even when no one is applauding, affirming, or choosing him. When that foundation is set, relationship becomes a gift, not a crutch. Love becomes shared fullness, not mutual emptiness. And that is the kind of love God protects by waiting. If God is building your identity right now, it's not because you're behind. It's because He refuses to let you enter covenant, carrying a wound that was never meant to be healed by romance. Reason 2. God trains discipline and stewardship. Jesus said, "Whoever is faithful in little will be faithful in much." Luke 16, chapter 10. This principle governs far more than money or responsibility. It governs relationships. Before God entrusts a man with someone else's heart, He first watches how that man stewards his own life. Singleness is not empty time. It is a testing ground, and what it reveals is often uncomfortable. David was anointed king long before he ever sat on the throne. In between the calling and the crown, he learned discipline in obscurity, tending sheep, fighting unseen battles, showing up when no one was watching. God did not rush him into leadership because character grows slower than talent. In the same way, God does not rush men into relationship because intimacy exposes what discipline can hide. When you are single, there is no one else to blame for your patterns, your habits, your consistency, your emotional regulation, your self-control. All of it surfaces. How you manage your time, your body, your thoughts, your temptations, your finances, your spiritual life. These things don't disappear once you're in a relationship. They multiply. If they are untrained in singleness, they become destructive in partnership. This is why God uses this season to teach stewardship. A man who cannot manage his emotions will burden a relationship with instability. A man who lacks discipline will lean on love to compensate for chaos. God withholds relationship not to frustrate you, but to protect the future woman from becoming collateral damage of unfinished growth. Singleness exposes what still needs order, and God is patient enough to let you see it, face it, and strengthen it. Because a relationship is not where discipline is learned, it is where discipline is required. When God trains you to be faithful in the little things now, He is preparing you to be trustworthy with something far greater later. Reason 3. God heals hidden wounds. Scripture tells us He heals the brokenhearted and binds up their wounds. Psalm 147:3. Notice the order. God heals before He joins. Healing is not something God expects marriage to accomplish. It is something He insists on doing first, because wounds that are ignored don't disappear in relationship. They bleed into it. Many men carry hidden injuries they rarely name: rejection, abandonment, betrayal, shame, or a deep fear of not being enough. In singleness, those wounds can stay quiet, buried under distraction. But once intimacy enters the picture, they surface. A harmless comment feels like rejection, distance feels like abandonment, conflict feels like threat, and suddenly, love becomes a battlefield instead of a refuge. God knows this. That is why He creates space before covenant. Singleness becomes a protected environment where healing can happen without harming someone else in the process. It is a season where God gently exposes what still aches, not to condemn you, but to restore you. Because unhealed pain does not stay contained. It leaks into communication, trust, and emotional safety. God does not delay relationship because He is withholding joy. He delays it because He is removing poison. He would rather take time now than allow pain later to destroy something sacred. Healing requires stillness, honesty, and time. Things that are often impossible once another heart is intertwined with yours. If God is keeping you single, it may be because He is binding wounds you didn't even know were open. And when healing is complete, love will no longer be a place where you seek repair. It will be a place where you give freely from wholeness. Reason 4. God forms obedience in the hidden place. True obedience is formed when no one is watching. Not when there is applause, affirmation, or accountability from another person, but in the hidden place where it is just you and God. This is why Jesus was led into the wilderness before He began His public ministry. There were no crowds there, no miracles, no recognition, only obedience forged in solitude. In the wilderness, Jesus was tempted not with obvious evil, but with shortcuts, ways to prove His identity without trusting the Father's timing. And He resisted every time. Why? Because His obedience was not dependent on being seen, validated, or supported by others. It flowed from love for the Father, not from the need to be affirmed by people. God uses singleness to form that same kind of obedience in men. Obedience that does not rely on a relationship to keep you disciplined, faithful, or grounded. Because a relationship cannot replace your relationship with God. If obedience only shows up when someone is watching, it will eventually collapse when pressure comes. Many men confuse spiritual growth with external structure. But God is after something deeper. He wants obedience that remains, even when you feel alone, even when no one notices, even when it would be easier to compromise. Singleness strips away substitutes. It reveals whether you follow God because you love Him, or because you fear losing something else. When obedience is formed in the hidden place, it becomes unshakable in public life. And when a man learns to walk with God in secret, he will not ask a relationship to carry a weight it was never meant to bear. Reason 5. God clarifies vision and direction. Scripture says, "Where there is no vision, the people perish." Proverbs 29:18. Vision is not ambition, and leadership is not dominance. Biblical leadership is direction, the ability to know where you are going and to guide others there with wisdom, restraint, and purpose. And a man cannot lead someone else well if he is still unclear about where God is leading him. This is why God often uses singleness to sharpen vision. In relationship, focus is divided. Decisions are shared. Direction becomes negotiated. But in singleness, God speaks with clarity. He reveals calling, exposes distractions, and defines boundaries. A man begins to understand not just what he wants, but what he is responsible for. Not just what excites him, but what God has entrusted to him. Without vision, relationships drift. Love becomes reactive instead of purposeful. Conflict multiplies because there is no shared direction to return to. God refuses to place someone beside you when you are still wandering internally. Not because you are incapable, but because vision must be established before partnership can be sustained. Singleness gives you the space to listen, to refine, and to align. It teaches you when to say yes and when to say no. It clarifies what you are called to build and what you must walk away from. When vision is clear, leadership becomes natural, not forced. And when God brings the right relationship, it will join a direction already set, not replace one that was never formed. Singleness is preparation, not punishment. Singleness is not God putting your life on hold. It is God working on the foundation. Nothing in this season is wasted. Every moment of solitude, every unanswered prayer, every quiet night where you wondered if something was wrong with you, God was building something deeper than you could see. He was forming identity before intimacy, discipline before devotion to another person, healing before union, obedience before visibility, vision before leadership. These are not delays. They are protections. God is far more concerned with who you are becoming than how quickly you arrive at what you want. If you are single right now, it does not mean you were overlooked. It means God is being intentional. He is shaping you into a man who can love without fear, lead without control, and commit without losing himself. A man whose worth is not borrowed from a relationship, but rooted in God. One day, when relationship does come, it will not have to fix you. It will not have to complete you. It will be able to grow with you. What God is building in you now will bless your future relationships later. And when you look back, you will realize this season was not empty. It was necessary.